Can you possibly fathom an 8-year-old child transforming the life of a global celebrity? A poverty-stricken girl eking out a living selling chewing gum on the streets managed to move Jonathan Roumie, the acclaimed actor portraying Jesus in The Chosen, to tears upon reading a humble letter. What profound essence imbued those words, penned in a child's nascent hand, that so deeply resonated with his heart? Today you will unravel how an improbable encounter in a modest eatery culminated in the very miracle a desperate family so desperately required. Yet what truths were truly inscribed within that pivotal letter? And what profound ramifications did this singular moment unleash, irrevocably altering the lives of all those involved? Prepare to be captivated by a narrative that will unequivocally reaffirm your belief in the enduring possibility of miracles. The Los Angeles morning sun struggled to penetrate the tattered curtains of the cramped apartment in East LA, its efforts appearing as feeble as the ragged gas that echoed through the room. Emma Rodriguez, an 8-year-old girl with curly brown hair framing a slender yet resolute face, was roused once more by the sound that terrorized her each morning, her mother Sarah's persistent, agonizing cough. The girl's large, expressive eyes, which still held a spark of hope despite all hardships, clouded with concern as she rose from the improvised sleeping mat on the living room floor. Her bare feet touched the cold linoleum as she walked toward the tiny bedroom where her mother lay, visibly weaker than the day before. "Mommy, are you in much pain today?" Emma asked in her soft voice, striving to sound braver than she felt. Sarah managed a faint smile before responding. "Don't worry about me, my angel. I'm just a little tired," she said, endeavoring to conceal her suffering. Sarah Rodriguez, at 32, was a woman whose delicate features bore the marks of a relentless struggle for survival, yet also an unyielding maternal strength that refused to crumble before her daughter. Her black hair, once lustrous and voluminous, now appeared dull and sparse due to the progression of the illness that ravaged her body day by day. Her trembling hands, which once meticulously stitched at the machines of the industrial laundry where she worked, now could barely steady a teacup without spilling. Her brown eyes, mirroring her daughter's, shone with an unconditional love that seemed to be the sole remaining wellspring of her strength to persevere. "Emma, darling, did you manage to sell any gum yesterday?" Sarah asked, attempting to steer the conversation away from her ailing condition. The girl showed the dented coins she kept in a small tin. "I made $3, Mommy, but people are in too much of a hurry and don't stop to buy anymore," Emma replied with a resigned sigh. The one-bedroom apartment they shared was a silent testament to deferred dreams and unfulfilled basic needs. Furnished with donated items and appliances that functioned only intermittently, the flaking walls were adorned with colorful drawings the girl had made with colored pencils found at school, creating a mural of hope that stood in stark contrast to the surrounding reality. The small, whirring refrigerator contained only a few basic provisions: milk nearing its expiration date, stale bread, and some meager remnants of food Emma had obtained with the help of compassionate neighbors. In the corner of the room, an antiquated television hummed, tuned to the religious programming Sarah enjoyed watching, particularly a series about Jesus that offered her solace during the most arduous times. Emma observed her mother intently, noticing how she clutched at her chest whenever she thought her daughter wasn't looking. "Mom, why won't you just tell me what the doctors disclosed?" Emma inquired, startling Sarah with her precocious maturity. Her mother exhaled a profound sigh, acknowledging the futility of further concealment. "You've always possessed an uncanny ability to discern my thoughts, haven't you, my little one?" Sarah replied with a wistful smile. Sarah knew she could no longer conceal the truth from her astute and discerning daughter, especially since Emma had demonstrated a remarkable fortitude in confronting adversity, a courage that often eluded many adults. With a profound sigh, a commingling of relief and apprehension, she decided the time had come to unburden herself of the weight she had shouldered in solitude for weeks. The conversation she had had with Dr. Martinez at the public hospital still reverberated in her mind. Her cardiac condition had precipitously worsened, and she would require an intricate surgical procedure, compounded by specialized post-operative care that would cost a staggering $15,000. For a family that struggled to scrape together $15 a week, that sum sounded like an insurmountable peak. "Emma, come here, my child," Sarah called, extending her trembling arms. I need to speak with you about a matter of grave importance." The girl approached slowly, her tentative steps betraying her prescience regarding the impending disclosure. "I already know it's about funding for your medical treatment, Mom," Emma stated, perching on the edge of the bed with an astonishing display of maturity. "I overheard you weeping during your phone call with the hospital last night." Emma's unvarnished honesty profoundly affected Sarah, making her realize that her daughter had precociously matured to shoulder burdens no child should ever be compelled to bear. With tears welling in her eyes, Sarah elucidated the entire situation. The loss of her job at the laundry when her coughing fits became uncontrollable, the relentless progression of the illness that now necessitated urgent medical intervention, and the exorbitant sum required for the treatment that could save her life. Emma listened in silence, absorbing every word with a gravitas that sharply contrasted with her tender age. Her small fists clenched, betraying the nascent determination blossoming within her young heart. When Sarah concluded her explanation, a heavy silence hung in the air like a dense fog, broken only by the relentless ticking of the wall clock, which seemed to underscore the dwindling sands of time. The girl remained pensive for a few minutes, processing all the information with a maturity that astonished even her mother. $15,000 is an immense sum indeed, Emma murmured, more to herself than to Sarah. She remained silent for a few moments, still processing the gravity of the information. "But I won't let you die, Mom. Not under any circumstances." That afternoon, while Sarah drifted into a fitful slumber under the influence of the pain medication a neighbor had lent her, Emma settled onto the cold living room floor with a crumpled piece of paper she had retrieved from the waste bin and a small eraserless pencil she used for her school assignments. Her childlike yet extraordinarily resolute mind had conceived a plan that made perfect sense in her world of innocent faith. She would pen a letter directly to Jesus, imploring him for the miracle her family so desperately required. With her tongue protruding in concentration, a telltale sign whenever she was deeply engrossed in a task, Emma began to write with her awkward yet earnest script, meticulously choosing each word as if drafting the most momentous document of her young life. The letters danced across the page in an erratic fashion, some capitals interspersed with lowercase, misspellings that betrayed her tender years, yet every word imbued with a sincerity that would undoubtedly move the heart of anyone who read it. "Jesus needs to know I trust him implicitly," Emma murmured to herself as she wrote. She paused for a moment to ponder her words. "The teacher always says that he loves children and hears our prayers." When she finally finished writing, Emma folded the letter with the meticulous care one reserves for a precious treasure, smoothing each crease with her small hands until the paper lay perfectly flat. The letter contained not only a desperate plea but also the earnest promises of a child willing to undertake any sacrifice to save the life of the most significant person in her world. She had pledged perpetual obedience, vowed to assist other children in need upon reaching adulthood, and promised never to ask for anything for herself again if Jesus granted this solitary miracle. The simple crumpled paper now bore the immense weight of all the dreams, fears, and hopes of a family pushed to the brink, yet resolutely refusing to relinquish their faith. Emma carefully tucked the letter into the pocket of her faded blue dress, feeling as though she carried a direct conduit to the divine. "Mommy always says Jesus lives in the church," Emma mused, rechecking to ensure the letter remained secure in her pocket. She took a deep breath, steeling herself with resolve. "If I deliver it in person, he will receive it at the opportune moment." When Sarah awoke from her slumber, she found Emma neatly arrayed and resolute, her countenance displaying a blend of nervousness and hope that only children can manifest with such unadulterated clarity. The girl had meticulously combed her curly hair with a broken comb and donned her finest dress, which in truth was merely the sole garment devoid of visible tears. Her small worn shoes were secured with laces she had salvaged from a school donation box, and she carried an air of solemnity that made her appear far older than her 8 years. Sarah observed her daughter with a mixture of curiosity and a pang of foreboding, sensing that a momentous development was unfolding within the girl's resolute mind. Emma approached the bed where her mother lay and leaned in to bestow a tender kiss upon her forehead, a gesture that had become customary whenever she departed to vend chewing gum along the neighborhood streets. "I'll be out for a little while, Mommy." But today I won't be selling gum," Emma announced with a conviction that took Sarah by surprise. The resolve in the girl's voice was unmistakable. "I have something vitally important to attend to, something that will undoubtedly resolve all our tribulations." Sarah's heart constricted at her daughter's pronouncement, a gnawing apprehension taking hold that Emma might be contemplating something perilous or ill-suited to her tender age, driven by a desperate bid to secure funds for medical treatment. She was intimately familiar with her daughter's unyielding resolve, and knew that once Emma set her mind to a course of action, she seldom deviated, a trait that simultaneously swelled her heart with pride and gnawed at her with concern. Summoning what little strength remained, Sarah clasped Emma's small hand and drew her gently closer, her gaze fixed upon the large, resolute eyes that mirrored her own so strikingly. Emma's countenance bore the unmistakable mark of someone who had reached a momentous decision, one from which no earthly persuasion could sway her. Yet woven into that resolve was an undeniable innocence that assuaged Sarah's fears regarding her daughter's pure intentions. "Emma, my dearest, what precisely are you contemplating?" Sarah inquired, endeavoring to maintain a composed tone despite the wellspring of anxiety bubbling within her. Emma responded with a smile of such guileless simplicity that it pierced her mother's heart. "I'm going to deliver a letter to Jesus at church, Mommy," the little girl replied. "I've implored him for a miracle for you to recover, and I know with certainty that he will heed my plea." Emma's guileless and profound faith brought tears to Sarah's eyes, for she recognized in her daughter the identical, unwavering trust in God that she herself had assiduously cultivated throughout her own life, even amidst the most arduous trials. It was this very faith that had sustained her when her husband had forsaken them years prior, that had empowered her to find the resolve to toil when Emma was an infant, and that now offered solace during the wakeful nights consumed by pain and apprehension. To witness that she had successfully imparted this spiritual legacy to her daughter was, concurrently, her paramount triumph as a mother and her inexhaustible fount of strength to persevere in her struggle. Emma tenderly kissed her mother's hand and made her way toward the door, but before exiting she turned one last time, a smile illuminating her slender yet radiant face. "Return swiftly, my angel," Sarah urged, striving to conceal the tremor of emotion in her voice. She observed her daughter proceed towards the exit, a complex blend of pride and apprehension swirling within her. "And remember that we are already profoundly blessed simply by virtue of having one another, irrespective of whatever challenges may arise." Emma departed the apartment with resolute steps, the letter securely nestled in her pocket, and her heart brimming with an unshakable sense of hope. The Los Angeles afternoon sun blazed with an almost conspiratorial intensity, as if the very heavens were aligning themselves in support of her sacred quest. Her small legs propelled her resolutely through the familiar neighborhood streets, each measured stride drawing her closer to her destined encounter with the divine. Yet fate had orchestrated an unforeseen turn, one that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of her pilgrimage. As she proceeded towards St. Joseph's Church, Emma inadvertently bypassed a quaint Mexican eatery, Casa de Maria, only for her gaze to suddenly widen in recognition of a familiar figure seated solitarily at a windowside table. "It can't be," Emma whispered, halting abruptly and pressing her face intently against the pane. Her eyes, already wide, now dilated further with a mixture of profound surprise and fervent emotion. "It's him! It's the television Jesus my mom constantly watches." Emma remained transfixed, pressed against the windowpane for several moments, striving to fully comprehend the scene unfolding before her. Jonathan Roumie, the very actor who portrayed Jesus in the series her mother devotedly watched each evening, sat undisturbedly at a secluded corner table, engrossed in what appeared to be a sacred text. Her diminutive hands trembled with an overwhelming surge of emotion as she steeled herself to enter the establishment, acutely aware that this confluence of events could not possibly be mere happenstance, but rather an unequivocal divine harbinger that her fervent prayers were already being answered. With her heart pounding a furious rhythm against her ribs, Emma tentatively pushed open the establishment's glass door and took her initial steps onto the tiled floor, only to be promptly intercepted by Carlos. This middle-aged waiter, distinguished by his thick mustache and immaculate uniform, subjected her to a thorough, evidently disapproving scrutiny. The man immediately barred the girl's passage, his arms defensively crossed in a stance that unequivocally communicated the unwelcomeness of child panhandlers within those premises. "Child, you cannot gain entry here to solicit alms or peddle your wares," Carlos intoned, his gesture sweeping towards the chewing gum Emma habitually carried. "This is a reputable establishment, not a venue for street urchins to pester our clientele." The stark severity of Carlos's pronouncements pierced Emma's heart like a dagger, yet she steadfastly refused to let the burgeoning tears in her eyes deter her from her sacred quest. With a resolve astonishing for someone so young, she lifted her chin and looked directly into the waiter's eyes, attempting to explain that she wasn't there to beg for money or sell chewing gum, but for something far more significant and urgent. Her small fist clenched tightly around the letter she carried in her pocket, reminding herself that this piece of paper might be the sole hope of saving her mother's life, and that nothing and no one should prevent her from fulfilling her divine mission. Other restaurant staff began to converge, drawn by the commotion, and Emma realized she was becoming encircled by adults who saw her merely as an inconvenience, without grasping the gravity of the moment. The din of voices started to attract the attention of the few patrons present, creating a tense atmosphere that threatened to escalate into an embarrassing spectacle. "Please, sir, I don't want money, nor do I want to sell anything," Emma pleaded, her voice trembling yet remaining resolute. "I just need to speak with that man over there. It's very important. It's about Jesus." Jonathan Roumie, who had been engrossed in reading the Gospel of Matthew in preparation for his upcoming scenes, looked up upon hearing the commotion and immediately recognized the situation. A clearly distressed child being prevented from entering by staff overly zealous with the establishment's rules. His heart constricted at the sight, as it vividly recalled the biblical passages he had interpreted so many times, especially those where Jesus rebuked his disciples for attempting to keep away the children who wished to approach him. Carefully closing the book and rising from his chair, Jonathan strode toward the group with determined steps, his presence immediately altering the dynamic of the situation, as everyone in the restaurant recognized and respected him as a special patron. The staff subtly receded as he approached, aware that he was an influential and beloved figure in the neighborhood, someone whose opinion carried weight and whose words were always heard with attentiveness and respect. "Carlos, please, what is transpiring here?" Jonathan inquired with his soft yet firm voice, looking alternately at the waiter and at Emma. "Is this little one bothering anyone, or is she just trying to come in?" Carlos immediately stiffened as Jonathan approached, clearly discomfited by the prospect of explaining the situation to someone he held in such high regard, yet simultaneously resolute in upholding the restaurant's policies, which he deemed crucial for maintaining a discerning clientele. He gestured toward Emma with an expression that blended embarrassment and justification, attempting to convey that he was merely adhering to the proprietor's established regulations to prevent the establishment from becoming a haunt for beggars and street vendors. The waiter appeared genuinely conflicted between his professional duty and the reverence he harbored for Jonathan, knowing the actor was renowned for his kindness and compassion, traits that rendered it challenging to dispute his intervention on the child's behalf. Emma observed the interaction between the two men with wide eyes, perceiving that Jonathan possessed an intrinsic authority that compelled people to heed and respect his words, precisely as she had envisioned Jesus would be in real life. "Mr. Jonathan, I was merely enforcing the restaurant's policies," Carlos explained, visibly chagrined. The girl entered, and typically these children come to solicit money or hawk items, which tends to discomfit other patrons. Jonathan regarded Emma with a gentle, paternal expression, immediately discerning the blend of resolve and vulnerability in her large, expressive eyes, as well as the way she clutched something in her pocket with a reverence that suggested it was exceedingly precious to her. He slowly knelt to meet the girl at eye level, a gesture that conveyed profound respect and genuine attentiveness, making Emma feel seen and valued for the first time since she had entered the restaurant. His face radiated the same benevolence and compassion she had witnessed on television, but now magnified by the proximity and the tangible reality of being in the presence of the person who, to her, embodied a direct connection to Jesus Christ. The other staff members observed the scene in respectful silence, recognizing they were witnessing something extraordinary, even if they did not fully grasp the profundity of the moment unfolding before their eyes. Jonathan gently extended his hand towards Emma, a silent invitation for her to feel secure and embraced in an environment that had only moments before been hostile to her. "Hello, dear. What is your name?" Jonathan inquired, his voice exuding genuine warmth and reassurance. "I'm Jonathan, and I'd be truly interested to know what has brought you here today." Emma was overwhelmed by such profound emotion that for a moment she was speechless, for being in Jonathan Roumie's presence felt akin to standing before Jesus himself, at least in her childlike, faith-filled mind. Her small hands trembled as she struggled to process the surreal nature of the situation. There she was, a destitute and desperate girl, being treated with such kindness and deference by the person she considered the closest earthly representation of Christ. Her voice thick with emotion, she finally managed to introduce herself, reciting her name and explaining that she recognized Jonathan from the series her mother devoutly watched, especially during the most arduous periods of her illness. The actor listened patiently to every word, discerning the absolute sincerity in the child's voice and the way she regarded him with a blend of reverence, hope, and such unadulterated faith that it profoundly moved him. Carlos and the other staff observed the interaction with growing comprehension, realizing this was not a typical scenario of a child seeking alms, but something far more profound and significant. "My name is Emma, Mr. Jonathan," she said in a trembling yet hopeful voice. "I recognized you from television, from the series about Jesus that my mommy watches when she's very sick." Jonathan felt a shiver run down his spine upon hearing Emma's words, for they carried an emotional weight he hadn't experienced in a long time, reminding him of the sacred responsibility he bore in portraying Jesus and the tangible impact his work had on people's lives. He invited Emma to join him at his table, gesturing gently to Carlos to indicate that it was permissible and that the girl was welcome there. An authorization the waiter immediately acknowledged with a respectful nod. As they walked toward the table, Jonathan observed Emma's careful movements, as if she were acutely aware of being in a special and significant place, and also the way she shielded something in her pocket with a devotion that piqued his curiosity. Once seated opposite each other, he offered her something to eat or drink, but Emma politely declined, explaining that she hadn't come there for material charity, but for something far more significant and pressing. The atmosphere around the table seemed imbued with a special resonance, as if their meeting had been preordained, and both were fulfilling their roles within a grander divine design. "Emma, may I offer you something to eat or drink?" Jonathan offered with genuine solicitude. "You appear to have traveled quite a distance to reach this place, and it would truly be an honor to share a meal with you." Emma took a deep breath, mustering every ounce of courage she possessed to explain the true purpose of her presence, acutely aware that this was the pivotal moment when everything could change for her family, depending on Jonathan's response to her extraordinary plea. With reverent and deliberate movements, she retrieved the crumpled letter from her pocket, clutching it as if it were the most precious object in the world, and placed it on the table between them with a solemnity astonishing for someone of her tender age. Her words flowed out in an emotional and urgent torrent, detailing her mother's grave illness, the $15,000 required for treatment, her unwavering faith in Jesus, and how she had penned that letter imploring a divine miracle. Jonathan observed and listened with undivided attention, realizing he was witnessing one of the purest manifestations of faith he had ever encountered, a faith that led an 8-year-old child to believe that delivering a letter to someone who portrayed Jesus on television could result in a tangible miracle. The unadulterated sincerity in Emma's every word stirred something profound within his heart, recalling his own pronouncements as Jesus about the faith of children. "Mr. Jonathan, I do not wish for food or money," Emma stated, extending the letter with trembling hands. "I wrote this letter to Jesus, and since you speak with him every day on television, I thought you might deliver it to him." Jonathan received the letter with reverence, comprehending that he held something far more significant than a mere piece of paper, the pure and desperate hope of a family in crisis. As he carefully unfolded the crumpled paper and began to read the words penned in a childlike script, Jonathan felt his eyes welling up with tears, recognizing the profound depth of love and faith contained within those simple yet potent lines. The letter spoke of a sick mother, of a daughter who would sell gum indefinitely if necessary, of a family possessing nothing but their faith, and of a child willing to make any sacrifice to save the most important person in her life. Tears began to stream down Jonathan's face as he finished reading, and Emma watched his every reaction with a mixture of hope and trepidation, knowing that what transpired next would determine her family's fate. "Oh, Emma," Jonathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he clutched the letter. "This is one of the most beautiful and profound letters I have ever read in my entire life." Jonathan gently cradled Emma's small hands in his own, feeling the gravity of the responsibility that this sacred moment bore, for he knew that his next words could either fortify or diminish the unadulterated faith of this child who saw him as a direct conduit to Jesus Christ. With his eyes still moist from the tears the letter had evoked, he took a deep breath and began to speak with the same gentle, loving voice he used when portraying the Savior, but now imbued with an even deeper authenticity because it emanated directly from his heart, stirred by the family's desperate plight. "Emma, my dear child, Jesus spoke these words that I want to share with you. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it," Jonathan said, gently caressing her hands. "Your faith is precisely the kind of faith that moves mountains, because it springs from a pure heart filled with love." Emma absorbed every word as if they were droplets of water in a desert, feeling an unfathomable peace permeate her heart as Jonathan continued to speak, using the scriptures to bolster her hope and validate her conviction that miracles indeed transpire when one possesses true faith. Jonathan continued to quote biblical passages he had memorized over the years, but which now took on new life as they were shared with someone who needed them not as mere entertainment, but as an anchor of salvation for her family in distress. "Remember what Jesus taught, little Emma. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." Jonathan continued, his voice imbued with conviction. "Your letter has already been heard, for it was penned with the kind of faith most beloved by God." Resolved to translate that faith into tangible action, Jonathan pulled out his phone and began making urgent calls to influential contacts he knew, mobilizing his network in a race against time to secure the $15,000 required for Sarah's treatment. Emma watched with burgeoning admiration as he spoke with producers, fellow actors, Christian entrepreneurs, and charitable organizations, explaining the situation with a fervor and urgency that underscored how deeply the cause had resonated with him. Each call seemed to yield a new pledge of assistance: $1,000 here, $2,000 there, $5,000 from a benevolent organization, and gradually the requisite amount began to materialize through the generosity of individuals who placed their trust in Jonathan. "We've secured $12,000 so far, Emma," Jonathan announced, reviewing his notes with palpable satisfaction. "We're almost there, and I know God will guide us to procure the remainder." But then Jonathan's phone rang with an urgency that startled them both, and the strained voice on the other end of the line delivered news that utterly transformed the hopeful atmosphere that had settled between them. Emma watched Jonathan's face blanch as he absorbed the information that Sarah had been rushed to the hospital in critical condition, suffering from an internal hemorrhage that necessitated immediate surgery and could not await the full accumulation of the requisite funds. Jonathan gripped Emma's hand firmly, sensing the imperative to be strong for her in that moment of crisis, even as he privately grappled with his own fears and doubts about whether they would manage to save Sarah in time. "Emma, your mother is in the hospital and requires urgent surgery," Jonathan stated, attempting to keep his voice steady. "But we won't give up now, because I know our faith will see us through to the end of this journey." At the hospital, they found Sarah unconscious in the intensive care unit, connected to a myriad of devices monitoring her vital functions, while doctors worked frenetically to stabilize her before the surgery that could either save or claim her life. Emma clutched her mother's cold hand, while Jonathan urgently conferred with the doctors about the available options, discovering that even with the $12,000 they had managed to secure, an additional $3,000 were still required to ensure Sarah received the optimal treatment. Jonathan and Emma knelt by the hospital bed, their voices uniting in a fervent prayer that resonated through the hospital corridors, profoundly moving the hearts of nurses and doctors who paused their duties to witness that moment of unadulterated faith. Heavenly Father, we surrender Sarah into your hands, Jonathan prayed aloud, holding one of Emma's hands as she clutched her mother's. We know that with you, nothing is impossible, and we implore the miracle this family so desperately needs. Precisely at that moment of heightened prayer, Jonathan's phone rang once more, and on the other end was David Henry, a Christian entrepreneur and devoted admirer of the Chosen series, who had seen Jonathan's social media posts regarding the campaign to assist Emma and her family. With tears of gratitude streaming down his face, Jonathan listened as David explained that God had touched his heart so profoundly that he would not only cover the remaining $3,000, but would transfer a full $15,000 to ensure Sarah received the optimal medical treatment available. Moreover, David offered his private jet to transport Sarah to Cedars-Sinai, one of the nation's premier medical facilities, where she would undergo surgery performed by the most renowned cardiac surgeons. Jonathan, God laid it upon my heart to assist this family, David stated over the phone, his voice laden with emotion. I have just transferred $15,000, and my jet is en route to transport her to the finest medical facility possible. The surgery was an unmitigated success, and Sarah recovered with remarkable swiftness, surpassing all medical prognoses. Emma remained steadfastly by her mother's side throughout the entire ordeal, serving as an unwavering fount of strength and hope, while Jonathan visited regularly to offer spiritual succor to the family. Thank you, my angel, Sarah whispered to Emma when she finally regained her voice post-surgery. Your faith saved our entire family. 6 months later, Sarah was fully recuperated, working in a new position David had procured for her, while Emma was attending a private school. On a sunny afternoon, a mother and daughter visited Jonathan on the set of The Chosen, where Emma could witness firsthand how her hero brought the character of Jesus to life. Jonathan paused everything to welcome his special guests, introducing them to the entire cast as the family who taught me the true meaning of faith. Thank you for being Jesus for our family when we needed it most, Sarah said, embracing Jonathan. You showed us that miracles happen through people who choose to be instruments of God. Emma pulled a new letter from her pocket, this time an expression of gratitude instead of a desperate plea. Jonathan read the letter aloud to the entire set, moving everyone present with the words of a child who had witnessed the power of faith combined with love for one's neighbor. The sun set over Los Angeles as 3 transformed lives celebrated the testament that faith can move mountains when it finds hearts willing to act with love. Dear Jesus, thank you for the miracle, Jonathan read from Emma's letter. Now I know that the Lord works through people like Jonathan, and I want to be like that when I grow up. If the story of Emma and Jonathan Roumie has touched your heart and shown you how faith can move mountains, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And tell me, have you ever experienced a moment where your faith was tested, but God responded unexpectedly? Just as Emma discovered that Jesus works through people like Jonathan, perhaps God has used someone special to be a miracle in your life. Share your experience in the comments. May the Lord continue to bless you, and remember, with God, nothing is impossible when we have the faith of a child.